Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willies. Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Today, I am honored to speak with Dr. Omekongo Dibinga. He's an upstander. His life mission is to inspire all across the globe to take a stand when they witness an injustice, no matter how small or large. A John Maxwell Team top 30 speaker. He's an international speaker, trilingual poet, TV talk show host, rapper, and professor of intercultural communication at American University, where he also serves as a faculty affiliate to the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center. He is the author of Lies About Black People, How to Combat Racial Stereotypes, and Why It Matters. Buenos dias, señor. Omekongo Dibinga. How you doing, my brother?
I'm great, bro. How are you?
I am great. Look, it's an honor speaking to you. I remember our early days back at CNN iReports when I think we got a little bit too hot for our britches, that it kind of slowly went down because it was too substantive compared to the milk toast thing that they were doing at the station. But how have you been?
I've been good, man. We were killing it, back in those days, man. It was a lot of fun. It's great to see everything you've done with your own platform. But I've just been plugging along, raising kids and teaching kids, traveling the world and trying to create more communities where everybody could be celebrated and not tolerated, which clearly is needed now more than ever. But yeah, it's going well down in DC. Still running my wife and I still running our yoga studios, prioritizing wellness because, you got to put your mask on first and
Oh,
take care
yeah.
of yourself before you go do this work. And just taking it day by day.
Now, Dr. Dibinga, let me ask you this. Tell us a little bit about yourself first. Who are you?
Yes, well, as was said, my name is Omekongo, and that says who I am within itself. My parents are both from Congo, former Zaire, and that's where my name came from. I was named after the person who saved my life my grandfather's life as a child, and he was a great warrior in our village. I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. My parents made their way to the United States in the 60s and ultimately moved around and settled at Boston, where they got their doctorates from Harvard and taught there for a while. So I was born in Cambridge, and they did a lot of activism, Pan-Africanist. That's how I was raised. So I grew up with my 8 siblings in Boston. Graduated high school, spent the year at Morehouse, transferred to Georgetown. Really got a love and a passion for international affairs, and that's kind of what my academic work has led to. So did my undergrad there, master's at Fletcher School, and did my doctorate in international education policy. And that was a great place for me because it allowed me to merge my interest in international affairs, also being a teacher. I did education policy, but also I did my doctorate on Jay-Z because I'm also a rapper and a spoken word artist. So I was able to, and I did my doctorate on him. So I was able to combine all my loves there. And, since then I pretty much stayed in DC, raising my 3 kids, like I said, and traveling the world, trying to create more upstanders and not bystanders. My company's called Upstander International. And so we do consulting and, speaking and leadership training on how to create more upstanders and not bystanders.
I think the first time, we did a whole lot of iReports. I don't know. I think I have quite a few hundred of them under my belt as well as you do. And we had
Mhm.
some page counts out of this world. I would consider us some of the most serious ones that used any platform that we could get to
Oh,
promote
yeah.
social justice, etc. And that is what I've seen you doing throughout your career in all that you do. But first and foremost, let me first tell you that I think teaching is the ultimate profession in this world, the most important profession, and I don't think it gets enough credit that it should in this country. Where you're from, where I am from, Panama originally, you from
Mhm.
Congo. It's amazing because again, we revere teachers in those lands, unlike what it is here. What do you think? Do you think some of the malaise that we see in the country today, some of the miseducation, the ease with which people can be ill-informed, misinformed, and disinformed is a result of us not having the right um, the right respect for the teaching profession?
Well, what I would argue is that there's so much respect for the teaching profession and fear, which is why it's under attack.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
I
Because
like that narrative. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Because
yeah.
that's the first group that people are going for. And as somebody who does work in schools, public schools, private schools, charter schools, I when I look at these attacks, I have a whole chapter in my book on critical race theory, and I notice that in these schools, they're not coming for the gym teachers. They're not coming for,
The
even some of
coaches.
yeah, the coaches. They're not coming for building services. All of these people whose, professions are important. They're going for the people who teach history. They're going for the people who can, transplant knowledge to our kids. And so and of course, who else are they targeting in the schools? The librarians. So they are targeting the people with the most knowledge. They're trying to take over the school board. They're bringing these racist folks to the school boards and all of that. And so because of the importance that teachers have in our society, they're not just being ignored, they're being attacked. And if you look at what's happening in our society right now, much of what is happening has to do with what we have not been allowed to teach in our schools. Look at, we haven't had civics in schools for like 30 years plus.
Hmm.
And so you got people saying things like, oh, Vice President Harris needs to change the role and what happens in Gaza and things like that, not knowing that the vice president has no role to play and can't go against the president. They think that the president can just make laws. Yeah, they can do executive orders, but laws, there's this whole thing called Congress. There's this whole thing called the House of Representatives. And like kids and just don't know these things, and therefore adults don't know these things. And so they look at all these individuals as the guys holding all the power, and it's this guy, it's that guy. And because of that lack of education, that's a huge problem. And then we have to obviously talk about things like book bans, where over 10,000 books were, have been put on the ban list, last year, more to come. So people fear education. As we both know, it's one of the first places that dictators go for. They go to take over the media, and they go to challenge the intellectuals. And so we have to bring that back. We have to raise kids that are intellectually curious. We have to become intellectually curious as a society, and we have to embrace all forms of history as opposed to trying to deny it.
Now, by the way, has your book been banned yet?
Not yet. Well,
it's about to, right?
I'm sure it's coming.
It's coming. Now, given that, and I don't want to get directly into the election right now, I want to more concentrate on the disinformation that is out there.
Sure.
I love the work that you're doing. Okay. I follow your TikToks, and I like how you came out and gave the whole rundown on the election. I like but you haven't only done that on the election, you've done that on a whole lot of other things. TikTok is a platform that they're trying to take away. What do you think about it as a teaching tool?
Well, I'm a little bit nervous about all of these social media platforms because, one of the things we have to be mindful of is that, we use them and they're important, but they're also not controlled by, when you look at something like Twitter, not controlled by somebody who's from the United States. I believe he's a citizen now. But then you look at TikTok, it's the same thing. And, one of the things we have to be mindful of, and look, the US platforms are not any better, Facebook and so on and so forth, but we have to be mindful of who controls the information. And why am I seeing things like Joe Rogan on my Twitter feed and I don't follow him in any way, shape, or form? And I do believe that, TikTok has the ability to make sure that certain things they don't want to see, are suppressed on many ways. Sometimes I look at some of these videos and I'm like, how is like this going viral, but this isn't? Not even just from me. Like, I haven't had any viral TikTok videos, but I'm saying like even some people who have viral TikTok videos, you go and look at some of their other stuff, which might be more profound, and they're going like nowhere, right? So I'm like, how does that really work? But I do think at the end of the day, it is important for us, like people like you and me, to be on TikTok, because since a lot of our kids, or not a lot of our kids, a lot of people are getting their news from social media, it's important that we are getting into those feeds. People who have real information, real knowledge, can fact check things, can provide differing opinions, and I'm seeing people engage with you, and I'm seeing engagement with me as well from people who might be going to other places. So I believe that wherever there is an information platform, we have to have a presence there. there. And so my opinion on like TikTok is not like the same as like the US government because, competition from China and all of the other type of stuff. I think that that's real for them. But as it relates to spreading proper information, we have to jump into these spaces and be engaged. And that's what I'm doing.
Well, and you're doing a great job at it. Let's talk a little bit about the election. Um, what went wrong that allowed a misogynist, a thief, a thug, a person who lied about a university he never created, a rapist, and you can go on and on with probably 20 different things that he did wrong. How can people who have professed to be law and order folks, who profess to be moral, the moral part, like to call themselves the moral party, how could we possibly, as a country, have elected a Donald Trump again?
Well, as I said across all of my platforms, TikTok and YouTube and all of these places, America, Americud. That's it in short. The fact of the matter is, Donald Trump ran a campaign that only a white man could run. He ran on the parents of racism and misogyny. It's a same sex marriage. It's two males. He ran on those things. Look, they say that Kamala Harris ran on identity politics. She couldn't have run farther away from her identity because she wasn't allowed to. But Donald Trump was the one who said, "Look at me in my beautiful white skin." What's more identity politics than that? Donald Trump also ran on the politics of misogyny in terms of abortion. And, I ended it, everybody wanted it ended and I'm proud to have done it. This idea that I'm going to, machismo, this idea I'm going to protect you no matter what, like those types of things, that's at the core of America. Look, as much racism as we've experienced in this country, black men still got the right to vote before white women did. So the misogyny is deep. And so, Obama had the racism, but he didn't have the misogyny. Hillary Clinton had the misogyny. She still won the popular vote, but she still didn't win overall because of the Electoral College, right? What did Shirley Chisholm say in the 1970s? That it was harder for her to run as a woman than it was for her to run as a black person. Yeah. And that was in the 70s. So, look, an Asian person couldn't get up there and say, "Look at my beautiful skin," right? Black, Vivek couldn't do that. So Trump ran on that. A woman couldn't get up there and be like, "Oh, I love men. I'm going to protect them no matter what." Only a man can do that, right? And so he put those together. And he created a campaign of addition versus subtraction, from our coalition. And then the fact of the matter is, we got to be real about this, Egberto, is that this country was not ready to elect a black woman. A lot of people who said that they were going to be down on her, these Republicans and the like, they lied. And then he also took advantage of the racism that exists between, people who are black and people who are of Latino descent as well. And that hate that exists between us. There were some who just said, "I will just never vote for a woman." Someone just never vote for a black woman. And so he took advantage of, he didn't have a multi-months head start on Kamala Harris. He had a 248-year head start on Vice President Harris. And if you go back to 1619, even longer than that. And he played on all of that. And that's how we got to where we are today.
It is sad because I know, even with Obama, I wrote an article at the Daily Kos a few years back after Hillary Clinton lost. And I pointed out that it is interesting that I pointed out that just what you said, that misogyny and sexism, I don't like to do the comparison, but many a times it overpowers racism. Yeah. And I think once again, we see it, and then people want to make this election as if it is something that Kamala did. And I wrote an article on my Substack recently that said, this isn't about Kamala Harris at all. This is about America. And we have to wake up to this altogether. Now, do you think this is going to put a pause on any party trying to get a woman elected?
I fear that, and that is the problem. I feel like, she should run again. And people's like, "Oh, well, she didn't have time to do primaries." All right, go do the primaries. Like, see what happens. And I believe that the Democratic Party should keep putting up a woman until America is made to be ready for her. Look, you can't undo hundreds of years of misogyny with two electoral cycles with a woman at the top of the ticket. That's
Hmm.
just not how it works in our society. And like other countries have had women presidents, and then like some of them have, systems where, there have to be certain levels of representation of women, and there are disagreements with that. But it allows women to be put in people's face as potential political leaders so that when they get to the top, people are like, okay, we've been dealing with this for a while. But I do believe that in this next cycle for the Democrats, there's not going to be a woman at the top of the ticket. But let's add another part to this. Like, what does it mean for our society where somebody who has such a beautiful background as Vice President Harris and somebody who is white, like Hillary Clinton, both have to pick white males as their running mate? And let's add Barack Obama to that. Both Hillary and Harris went with two white men named Tim. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like,
Yeah.
that idea that you have to do this to appeal to this group, and it couldn't be a gay man, couldn't be Pete Buttigieg,
Right.
couldn't be the, Jewish guy, couldn't be Josh Shapiro because she would have been looked at as, too Jewish.
Oh,
But she,
Let me tell you, Omekongo, you are one of the few that actually realized that
Mhm.
that the reason Shapiro couldn't have, even though Shapiro is the best guy. Oh no, Donald Trump would have made mincemeat out of that ticket.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And again, that's identity politics at its best.
Yes.
So Kamala had to pick a white cisgendered male who represents Midwestern values to be on her ticket. Why couldn't she run with two women? Why couldn't she have like Wes Moore? Why couldn't she have a Ruben Gallego? Because that's what, because we also have to have a conversation about the Democratic consulting class and the
Oh
people,
boy. Yes.
you know what I'm saying, who
Yeah.
they need to be there. And I'm saying that we need to take over the party and we need to shatter that. So if we get two women who run together as the candidates, if we get a white person and a black, like whatever it is, the status quo has got to go. But I feel like if they keep this same Democratic consulting class, we are going to have a white man at the top of the ticket in 2028. And that is going to be extremely problematic if they do it because of their traditional views. If people win the primaries and so on and so forth, that's of course fine. But in terms of who we say needs to be there, people are always saying people like, the governor of California
Or
or
Kentucky. They're up on Kentucky right now.
that's what I'm saying. Andy Bashir and all of these guys are just like, nah, we need to keep coming back hard. We got to take over this party.
I had a call. We were talking from the president of a healthcare for all organization yesterday, and that's what we were talking about. And I told him that progressive stayed quiet during this election. There's a whole lot that occurred during this election that we were supposed to speak up again about, but we never wanted to be accused of the one bringing down the ticket. And
Yep.
we held our tongues. We held our tongues.
Hmm.
And now I think it is time that our tongues be held no more.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
I feel like a lot of us, did come back, we were upset with like, why is she embracing, the Liz Cheneys and stuff of the
Right.
world? And, because her consultant said you got to build a broad coalition and people saying she's running away from the base. And I'll be honest, like, I didn't really feel like she was running away from the base at honestly, because she was still in black churches, she was
Hmm.
still doing, she was doing black media, not enough, but she did a lot of black media outlets, a lot of black. I mean, so I'm not gonna say not enough. She did a lot. There were some places I wish she went to as well,
Hmm.
but I feel like at the end of the day, folks who were on the, one of the reasons she lost was because not because of the turnout for Trump, it was our turnout.
Didn't show.
Yeah.
But let me tell you something about that because I've researched some of that, and a lot of our no shows was the targeted marketing done by the Trump to different demographics, telling Palestinians she's anti-Palestinians, telling
Yes.
Jews she's anti-Jew, and some people who would never vote for Donald Trump, they didn't vote for Donald Trump, but they didn't vote at all.
And that is, look, that's one of my challenge with the level of sophistication of those of us
Yes.
people who identify as progressives or so-called progressives. When I think about the uncommitted movement,
Hmm.
I'm like, that you all would not see what Trump had in mind. The guy literally said that Gaza it's great beachfront property.
Hmm.
And if we have the political sophistication needed to understand that vice presidents still make decisions, you at least put in the person that you have the chance of influencing the most. Now,
Right.
look, I think it was not cool for like a Palestinian person or someone who's like pro Gaza, to not be at the DNC, and we can talk about those things. But it's like Bernie Sanders says, it's like, okay, yeah, we can talk about Netanyahu being a war criminal and stuff, but we still have to get in somebody who we could possibly pressure. And when I look at people like Rashida Tlaib and all of those folks, pulling back, look, I get it. But again, this is about options. And now you got a guy who's going to be the ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who said there's no such thing as a Palestinian.
Hmm. Yeah.
The guy who's going to be the U.S. ambassador, the Israeli ambassador to the United States, currently lives in the West Bank. And so
Right.
the lack of, strategic, and I get it, we're hurt, we're feeling, and then, you're listening to a guy who just was lying to you about what he was going to do, and you decide to stay home for that, or you decide to go for a Jill Stein, who only appears when there's a woman candidate on running for office because she didn't run in 2020, and
Hmm.
you vote for a guy who sat at the table with Vladimir Putin. Like that lack of sophistication, Trump actually took advantage of that. And look, my family's Congolese. Like, I've been dealing with genocide in the Congo, and a lot of part of it's supported by a lot of the U.S. policy. So I've seen it firsthand what happens when this U.S. government is part of policies that is destroying your own country. So I'm sympathetic to that, and even with that, I'm still voting for Harris because we can pressure her to do. And I feel like her policy
Right.
would be
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Look, that is important. I mean, after all, Bush bombed my country, to bomb Panama City, Colon, and David. Killed 10,000 Panamanians. They don't claim it, but killed 10,000 Panamanians. I still understand you have to separate country policy and person running. I spoke to Mark Thompson. I
Yeah.
interviewed him at Net Roots, and we were
Hmm.
talking about the same thing you talk about. It is time for us to start pushing the envelope. And I think coming now, starting now, I think progressives have to leave and you tell me if you agree or not. I think we have to leave the constraints of the Democratic Party for those who have held their tongues. And I think now that the Democratic Party is in flux, it is time for the progressives not to fall back on the who they wanted, Rahm Emanuel. They're talking about throwing Rahm Emanuel as the leader of the DNC. It's time for us to speak up, and not only speak up, but take over. Your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. And, sometimes with this whole thing of, progressives, sometimes I call them so-called progressives because some of these white, progressives are the type who have that diversity fatigue and, don't really want to be as inclusive as they claim to be because they see so many of us rising, the Westmores of the world, the AOCs of the world, the Rashida Tlaibs of the world. And so I believe we do have to take over. We do have to, from the ground up, we have to challenge the consulting class. There's a lot of folks who are in these consulting classes. Roland Martin was talking about this. Some of these organizations just opened up like this year and got these consulting contracts and the like. And so we got to get in. We got to get on the ground game. We can't think about 2026 2028 because we got the midterms in 2026. And there's a lot of work we can do locally if we start to say this is what we want. And look, we got the vote. You know what I'm saying? In terms of we got numbers in terms of young people. There's going to be a whole slew of new voters who are going to be coming in over the next few years. And so yeah, this is the time not to withdraw. And I'm getting so upset, Egberto, because I'm seeing all of these, oh, I'm done. I'm going to go chill for the next 4 years. Oh, y'all can have it. I'm just going to be sitting my popcorn, all this other type of stuff. It's like
No.
now is the time to get engaged. Roe v. Wade ended because right after Roe v. Wade was ushered in, these folks who are anti-abortion, they started then. They were having rallies every year, protests every year down in Capitol Hill. There'll be like 10 of them. But it was like, we're going to stay the course. Our impatience is part of the problem. It's part of the reason why they get over. Because if Biden doesn't do something now, if Harris doesn't do something now, then it's like, all right, well, we're done. We're washing our hands. And that is part of our complacency is part of the reason we got here. If we got the same amount of votes that Biden had for Harris, she's the president now.
Yeah, by a
Period.
landslide.
By a landslide.
And look, we're talking for Roe v. And this is what I explained on my KPFT show, 90.1 FM. I told them, look, it took 50 years for them to overthrow Roe v. Wade. Some of the people who started the attempt to overthrow it are dead.
Yep.
The movement continued. That is what those of us that claim to be progressive need to do. We need to stay with the movement. We keep having these lapses. Obama came in and we went to sleep. It was
Yes.
like, no, you can't sleep on Obama. You have to push Obama.
That's right.
Biden came in, we didn't quite go to sleep on Biden. Actually, because again, if you take a look at the policies Biden put out there, was a hell of a lot more progressive than Obama. The closest one came is Roosevelt. But that said, we have to stay engaged. But Mekongo, I can't. We have to talk a little bit about that thing behind you. Lies about black people. Why did you write that book?
I wrote the book because I felt like coming out of 2020, the book came out in 2023. I felt like coming out of 2020, there were a lot of people who, especially like non-black people, especially white people, who were saying, okay, I was at the rallies, I shouted Black Lives Matter, but what do I need to do to go deeper? How do I challenge what I know more? And so I wrote this book to challenge the lies that have been told, because once you challenge the lies, then you can work towards policies that embrace the truth. But something was interesting when I was doing this, Egberto, is that I went online and said to people, tell me the lies that you were told about black people. And I expected the majority of people to respond to not be black, but the majority of people who responded were black people. And so they were talking about lies that, we were told black people can't swim, black people don't go to college and all of that. So the book is about anybody who needs to challenge the lies. The book is, each chapter deals with a particular issue relating to a lie, lies about black people being more prone to be criminals, about education, about the history of housing, about black people and images in the media. I go back to that. I have a chapter on artificial intelligence and how racist that is. I also infused the book with interviews with people who are on their anti-racist journey, people of diverse backgrounds. I also, of course, infuse it with some of my own poetry as well. If you ever want to hear some, just let a brother know. And then there are activities that people can do in the book as well on their anti-racist and what I would also call pro-equity journey. And so that's what the book is about. People can learn more about that at liesaboutblackpeople.com.
Liesaboutblackpeople.com. I'll have that in the accompanying blog that will come with the program. So, Senor Dr. Omekongo, what would you have liked me to ask you, talk about, or anything that I didn't? I mean, that's always my last question. If you ever heard my interviews before,
The most important thing that you could ask me is, what happens next?
what happens next?
What happens next is, number one, we take a deep breath and retreat into taking care of ourselves. We have to look at our habits that are preventing us from fully engaging. As somebody who, as a news consumer, like probably the majority of my waking hours, I decided, for example, I have to stop doing that. I have to make sure that my news consumption is minimized. I have to make sure that I'm getting my sleep. I have to make sure that I'm getting my rest, that I'm getting my exercise, that I'm checking on my diet. Because look, many of these guys, in my opinion, are going to try to take us out on many levels, whether it's, physically, whether it's through changing our platforms, destroying our platforms, whether it's through investigations, incarceration, whatever it is. But we can't take ourselves out. And so the more we take care of ourselves, the better we are going to be engaged in this fight. When Dr. King was assassinated, he was 39 years old, but he had the heart of a 60-year-old when they did the autopsy because of the stress of the movement. So we have to take care of ourselves. What next is we have to reengage in our communities. A lot of people who are mad at what happened can't tell you who their city councilor is, can't tell you who their state representatives are, can't tell you anything beyond possibly who their senator is. And so we have to reengage that way. The fight has not stopped. We had a night to be mad, but we have to stay engaged. If not, look, I'm not convinced. I am convinced that Trump is going to try to stay in office for a third term. I do believe that. And he's got the cronies to help usher that in. He even said that when he went and talked to folks at the House. Mm-hmm. And he's not joking. People have to realize when you study history, he is not joking. And so before you know it, it's going to be like, oh, shoot, what happened? And so at the end of the day, they say those are those people who make things happen, those people who watch things happen, and those people who wake up and say, what just happened? Which one are you going to be?
Dr. Omekongo Dibinga, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. Folks, you can find, wait a minute, isn't your website also omekongo.com as well?
Omekongo.com, upstandardinternational.com, they lead to the same places, and liesaboutblackpeople.com is a subset on that website as well. But people can also subscribe to youtube.com/Omekongo and all the social media platforms, just my first name, @Omekongo.
Well, all of that will be in the lead as well as in the blog that corresponds to this interview. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you.
Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto, Willies, your host. As you know, much of what we talk about here at Politics Done Right, uh, irrespective of it being on the progressive side, is the ability to speak to the other side, the ability to coexist because we only have one country and nobody's leaving. Anyhow, Jill Long Thompson is a former congresswoman from Indiana who taught ethics as a visiting clinical associate professor at the Kelley School of Business and the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University, Bloomington. Until 2015, she was board chair and CEO of the Farm Credit Administration, a position to which she was appointed by President Barack Obama. She is the author of The Character of American Democracy, Preserving Our Past, Protecting Our Future, and her current book is Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. It is my pleasure to have you on Politics Done Right. Former Representative Congresswoman Jill Long Thompson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me on your show. It is a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
Well, let me tell you, first of all, I love the subject because I think until we get to the position where we realize we're one country and we're all going to have to work together somehow to get things done, I'm glad that you wrote a book, and it's an interesting way in which the book was written because it was a lot of authors, really. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what got you to put in all of this together and how you did it?
Indiana University Press actually asked me to produce this book. The director, Gary Dunham, asked me to do this, and I just started reaching out to friends and I would ask them if they were interested in participating or if they could recommend somebody to participate. And I was really not surprised, but very pleased with the number of people who believe, as I do, that bipartisanship is essential to democracy. I think sometimes because we are so busy with our day-to-day activities, we don't think about what it means to live in a democracy. And it's very important to recognize that the process by which we develop, adopt, execute, and enforce policy and laws, the process is as important as the laws and the policies that we adopt. And if we don't follow a process that is democratic, then we are undermining what we are and what we stand for.
When you talk about process, explain what you mean by process, because right now, a lot of people would tend to believe that the process just isn't working. Some even believe that the process has never worked for some. So what do you call this process? And then I want to pivot that back onto something else, but let's stay on this one for now.
The process has to be fair. It has to be honest. It has to have integrity. And we have to respect everybody's right to participate. And we must respect those with whom we disagree in the process as much as we respect those with whom we agree. I remember growing up hearing a term, great minds all think alike. Well, if that were so, life would be much easier, wouldn't it? Because there are lots of great minds. But in fact, great minds don't all think alike. And we need to show respect for people who have different experiences, different knowledge, different perspectives. And we actually end up with better policy when we incorporate the input and make sure that everybody has a seat at the table. You have probably seen these data. But McKinsey did some research on corporations, and those corporations that have diversity in their executive management, and diversity, it includes ethnic diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, they outperform financially those companies that don't have the diversity. In the legislative process, the legislators who reach across the aisle and work with members of the other party are more successful at getting legislation adopted than those who just want to work with their own party. And So not only is it the right thing to do in terms of democratic values, we get better response, better results. We're stronger when we recognize that everybody has and should have a seat at the table.
I think, I've had, I originally I wasn't a President Biden supporter, but I've learned to admire President Biden in that a lot of what he's done, he's done both sides, right? When he negotiated the infrastructure bill, it was a very bipartisan bill, and he took the opinions when he negotiated things that really required a certain values that folks on the left has. He also did that appropriately with the right kind of negotiation vis-a-vis when it came out to the IRA. So, I mean, I think he has shown a balance in what bipartisanship should look like, more so when one looks at it than anybody else. What are your thoughts, though, of those presidents who, in effect, failed the model that, let's say, a President Biden followed, and to some extent, even President Obama in the way he negotiated the Affordable Care Act, in as much as I had a whole lot of problems with that?
Well, I think that it's important to recognize that negotiation and compromise are central to the democratic process. And not only do we get better decisions when we do that, but those are the values of democracy. And there are values that are recognized worldwide regarding people who have character. And I think to be a good leader, you have to be a person of character. You have to be principled and you have to have integrity. And among those shared values regarding people who have character are respect for others, caring for others, trustworthiness, and there are others as well. But I think that President Joe Biden is very much a reflection of those values. He respects others, and he has no problem reaching out to people with whom he disagrees. Now, they may argue, but generally they argue respectfully. And respect for others is essential to the democratic process. It's also essential to good decision making.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I want to do a quick little segue here because this is something that continues to bother me with respect to the Senate and things like the filibuster, et cetera. Right now, I think mathematically speaking, the Senate is not a very democratic institution, just based on the structure of 100 senators, 50 states, 2 senators from every state, irrespective of size. And then we have the other issue of having to get supermajorities for several issues that pretty much, whereas we get very concerned about what many would call the tyranny of the majority, it seems like that gives a minority view, a larger tyranny, if you will, in that not only are senators not represented based on population, but even in the structural nature of the Senate, it even gives those that much more power. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you have expressed my concerns very well. I think the challenge is that democracies are made up of humans, and we have to have checks and balances in the system. And sometimes those checks and balances work very well at protecting individual rights and the democratic process. Sometimes they do not, because it is human nature to want what we want and not want necessarily what someone else wants. That's how we are as humans. I actually have a doctoral minor in social psychology and have studied human behavior because my area of research was consumer economics in my PhD program. And we just have a way as humans of seeing things the way we want to see them rather than as they actually are. And that's why democracy and the values of democracy are so important, because our biases can be offset, if you will, by others who also have biases, but biases that are different from our own. And then every once in a while, you do run into somebody who really does seek the truth and does the research necessary to provide the information to make good decisions. But I think democracy is very challenging, but it's the best approach because you get better decisions than if you're in another form of government. And we just have to keep working and fighting hard to ensure that democratic principles are upheld in the process of adopting policy, executing it, and enforcing it.
Interestingly, if you take a look at your book, you have folks writing pieces together like, who would think Trent Lott and Tom Daschle would write a piece together? Or then you have, I saw the two of them together and said, oh, interesting, but it's great to see that. And then, of course, you have Todd Young on Reflections. But tell me, how did you go about choosing these people for the book and the order in which you put it in the book?
Well, I reached out to the Bipartisan Policy Center. It's a not-for-profit organization that is bipartisan that works to advance bipartisanship in policymaking. And I also reached out to the Association of Former Members of Congress. And I have donated all the royalties that the book earns to those two organizations because in promoting the book, I don't want to be promoting it and then having some kind of financial reward. I taught ethics, and
right.
I have an issue with that, an ethical issue with that. So, and I know that they will use the money for the greater good of the country. But I had considerable help in reaching out to. Now, I do know Tom Daschle and have met Senator Lott, but don't know him personally. But by working with the Bipartisan Policy Center and the Association of Former Members of Congress, it allowed me to reach out to many people that I respect but did not have contact information for. And then regarding the order of the book, I always think it's important to defer to people who have more expertise in certain areas than I do. And I deferred to Gary Dunham, the director of IU Press, on the order because I thought he had a better sense of how to put the book together, if you will.
Now, we are, two more questions. We are in dire straits as a country. I mean, earlier on in our discussion, you made a very important point that leadership requires ethics, it requires character, it requires all these things. But the thing about it is the American people pick leadership. We are the ones who pick leadership. We have one of our candidates that's running, and I don't mean to be partisan here, but these are just statements of fact. We have a person that is running for the presidency that simply does not have the morality or the character to hold that position. It is also somebody that has never, ever won the popular vote. In fact, the American people have always made the right decision based on the number of votes. However, based on what I call the undemocracy of our Constitution, we have gotten this person elected and could again, if the pivots fall in the wrong place. What can we do in the future? Like I said, the American people seem to make the right choices, but you spoke about structural democracy before. What can we do to ensure that the structural democracy comes out with the right answers?
Well, I think that one area where we really need to put some focus is on information literacy. I am old enough to remember how prevalent local news outlets were. Mm-hmm. And I think that while we can be frustrated with news stories that we read and opinion pieces that are written by editorial boards, the reality is professional news reporting and doing what you are doing, it actually contributes to better decision making, not just in politics, but in business and in a whole host of areas. I think that we need to address information literacy, in K through 12, but also in higher education. I also think that we need some reforms in how, I don't think it, I know it. We need reforms in how we draw congressional districts. They need to be drawn by independent commissions, not by politicians whose political future is going to be affected by the congressional lines that are drawn. Gerrymandering has become a major issue for this country, and we have more politicians who are representing districts that are very safe for them. In the last 50 years, I am the only Democrat to have been elected to represent the district that I represented in Northeast Indiana. The districts have changed and the lines have changed, but that part of the state of Indiana, and I was elected for 3 terms. And one term was short because it was a special election that took place on March 28th, 1989, rather than in November the year before. I want to be completely honest about that. But we need districts that are more balanced, because if you are in a district that is more balanced, then politically, not just is it a good idea that reflects character, but politically, you have to listen to both sides, or you won't get reelected. And so I think that the way we draw congressional districts is very important. But I also think providing better information on the information that we have access to. Social media platforms are notorious, many of them, for the dishonesty that is posted on them. And there's research that shows that something that is false gets distributed more widely and more rapidly than the truth. And that's a real problem in a democracy.
That sure is. Now, have you ever heard of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact? That says you've heard about it, or
I have, but I'm not overly familiar with it.
Yeah, the only reason I'm saying that is what it does is it says, since we know it's almost impossible to get a constitutional amendment to get rid of, let's say, the electoral college, the idea is that if we have enough states that adds up to 270 electoral votes, that no matter who wins that state, the popular vote winner would be selected, given that the states have states' rights that allow them to decide. You know, it's amazing because some will complain, but hey, that's what state rights is. We can we can create the laws that by which we're governed. And I'm hoping right now, I think we're short about 3 or 4 states to get that done. I'm hoping that at some point that gets done. But my last question to you is always the same for everybody. What should I have asked you that I didn't?
Well, I think you've covered just about everything that is relevant to the book Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. I would just say that it's very important that we continue to have these discussions, because they are critical to our democracy continuing. We didn't become the strongest nation in the world by some random process. Democracy works, and it works best when we tell the truth. It's like in a family. When we are honest in our families, but also respectful to the family members with whom we disagree, the family is stronger. It's very complex in this age of large populations and diversity and technology. I think that, for example, raising children today would be such a challenge, because there are just so many things to be thinking about and doing every day, and there's so little time for reflection. But in a democracy, we are all responsible for making it work, and we need to figure out, as a nation, how we get better information to people, how we learn to accept information that is true but that we don't like, and learn how to work together and to disagree in ways that are not disagreeable.
Love that. Former Congresswoman, Indiana Congresswoman Jill Long Thompson, and author of Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. All the information for getting the book will be in the links within our blog as well. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you, and thank you for what you're doing.
Donald Trump says he's going to start on day 1 the deportation, the disruption to get people out of the country. And now California farmers are starting to get worried because California produces about 25% of all our goods. And the kind of work that's required to produce all those vegetable goods, plant goods, etc. The truth of the matter is, no matter what you pay, you can't get Americans to do that kind of work. Again, we've moved away from training people to do all kinds of works because we have exported everything and we have imported all kinds of things to solve what we've learned or taught people not to like to do anymore. And what that means, if Trump is successful in starting this deportation, look, he's going to destroy his own administration by doing this, right? Because again, what's going to happen is it's going to be that prices are going to go through the roof because there's going to be, like happened in Georgia when they started getting rid of people, and like happened in Florida, the construction industry is just about destroyed because of the immigration issue. And in Georgia, the peaches are left on the ground because of the immigration issue. It's about to happen throughout the country, assuming Donald Trump doesn't get paid off to just give a facade of throwing people out. Because remember, the man is a con man. I had on my show yesterday where I said, I am not really sure that the deportations are going to occur as you think. I think they're making a big hoopla out of it right now, and they are going to round up a few criminals that they call criminals to make a big picture out of it. And in the background, I think they will be taking bribes. And these are the bribes that they're going to take, in my opinion. This is opinion, folks. I separate opinion from facts. I separate opinions from facts. What I'm giving you now is an opinion, not a fact. It's an opinion. All right. My opinion is the following. Donald Trump is going to get paid off for the private sector to create detention centers. And that's going to be used as a cost center to enrich a few, to lock up a whole lot of folks that they can somehow say you're a criminal, or that doesn't have a marginal effect on our agricultural sector, where we actually need a lot of labor. So I think they're going to give a big hoopla to show that they're locking people up because they think you want to see that. They think you want to see us harm those immigrants that came over the border looking for a better life, that you want to get rid of them, that you hate them, that you want to do the non-biblical thing, that when Jesus said open your hearts to these people, the evangelical Christians have said otherwise, against the Bible, of course. But you are going to want to get rid of those people, and they think that you want to see those people on buses and kicked and thrown into these detention camps. That's what they think you want to see, and they're going to make you see that. So they're going to enrich quite a few people by showing you that they can be evil to those others, those people that walked across the border, number one. Number two, in the background, they will be taking bribes from the big agricultural industrialists. Hey, turn a blind eye, guys. Turn a blind eye. Let my people work and get the crop out. Turn a blind eye. I'll donate to your campaign. I'll donate to the RNC. I'll do all these things. Anybody doesn't think the possibility exists that this deportation machine is not about destroying the agricultural sector, because that is like hurting yourself, but to be in a position to bribe, to profit on somebody else's back. The typical thing the capitalist does. That is what again, folks, that particular part of my narrative is not fact. The first part was fact. This part is opinion. We'll see if it occurs. So again, we told you so. We told you these are the machinations that were going to happen. And as we just showed from all reporting, it has started. His administration has not yet started, but you have to come into the administration with policy, and the policies that are out there are saying he wants to maintain the tax cuts, and he has to find the monies from somewhere, because again, the deficits and the way the financial sector is set up, he has to find the money somewhere. And that money comes from whom again? From you. All those benefits that you get, that adds up, and they have to get it from you. So my brothers and sisters in Appalachia who overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump, remember, you are the poorest part of this country. You are the ones receiving the most food stamps and other support from our government. And it is you who will be paying the price to ensure that these wealthy politicians or these wealthy industrialists, wealthy capitalists, wealthy oligarchs continue to get the tax cuts that they have gotten. And for all of you who said, hey, I voted for Donald Trump because he said he was going to not tax my tips. Let me remind you, if you've ever filled out your 1040 form or your 1040 easy or whatever, guess what, brothers and sisters? Your tips weren't taxed anyway. That was a promise not worth the money it was stated on. And let me tell you why your tips was never ever taxed. Your tips weren't taxed because every American citizen gets I think it's a $23,000 write-off up top, deduction up on the top. On your top line. And unless you make so much in tips that it pumps you into the $60,000 to $70,000 category of income, you didn't pay taxes on your tips anyway. So it was a promise that sounded good, but here's where the promise makes sense. When Kamala Harris said, I am going to also not tax tips, she made sure to talk about it being for service workers. But she made sure that stockbrokers couldn't use it. But guess what? The no tax on tip is just another leverage from the parasites that do no work in our economy. Not the server who serves you your platter at the restaurant, but for the guy who said, I am going to start making the income that I earn from helping you with your stock, from being your financial planner, that's now going to be a tip. Will you give me a tip? They didn't put a limit on the tip, and now I get a new tax break for millionaires. Folks, we continue to be played. And as long as we allow ourselves to be played, we'll continue to get played. Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It. As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto, Willies. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.